Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Some Christian Guy. You can find me on Facebook under the same name. YouTube, if you're viewing this somewhere else, you'll find me on YouTube as well, Some Christian Guy, and you will find me on onewave.com/ram media. For those of you that don't use Facebook and all of those sorts of things, it's an alternative site, a competition as it were, to that sort of thing. So you can find me on there if you wanna if you've got want to join up a sort of alternative media, social media type of thing that doesn't spy on you and do other dodgy stuff. Pretty good so far. We'll see. They develop as they go. Right now, today I'm going to be talking to you guys about. On a previous video, I talked about identifying cultish behavior. So to give context for those of you who haven't seen it, I recommend you go see it. But anyway, basically I looked at how we generally identify behavior in a cult, and if we can see if the behaviors that are associated not only with the leader of a cult, but also the members of a cult and the tactics that cult leaders use to hook people into their cults. If we could see that that sort of pattern emerging on much larger scale. So most cults are generally only a few hundred or maybe even 1,000 people strong, or at least the ones that we hear of the most. But the cults can be significantly larger than that. And I went on to demonstrate, or at least propose the thesis that the government, in terms of the government and sort of the whole globalist agenda, with all the Freemasonry and all of the secret societies and all that kind of stuff, and how they use in terms of social engineering and in terms of the psychological warfare and the psyops and things like that they use on populations, that they're using the same tactics and basically turning large members of society into basically members of a massive state cult that will then adhere to the doctrines of the cult in a very emotional, unreasoning, unthinking, and even very, very violent manner as well, and how they will preserve that ideological narrative at all costs. And so I pointed out that feminism, for example, falls under this this description, the way a lot of basically everyone on the left and even on the right, how they all really fall to these kinds of things. So I went through 9 points, and one of the points that I sort of occurred to me that I didn't put into the video because the video was quite long, was how cults always have they always set dates for when the world is going to end. So there's always some global crisis that if we don't address now, or whatever the case might be, there's going to be catastrophe and all that sort of thing. So they love sort of setting false prophetic deadlines for the end of the world and all that sort of thing. And one of the biggest culprits of this in recent times that we found, we see this in a lot of like you get these Christian groups that come out and Jesus is going to come at this date, on that date, on that date, and then it goes completely viral, and then Jesus doesn't come, and then the cult sort of fizzles away after a lot of, and leaving a lot of the members disillusioned and all of that sort of thing. And this kind of thing has happened for forever. It's been happening for forever. And the reason, again, what a lot of people don't realize is the only reason these things can happen is because of ignorance. So I'm gonna quickly so here's I'm just getting up a quick Bible verse sort of thing, but just to show, because like I said in my previous video, that these cults rely on a significant amount of ignorance in their followers. So let me just go back there, and we're going to pull up the Bible verse, right? So I'm just going to show you here. So when these Christian groups, because in the most recent one, I think it was maybe about 2 years ago, there was another ridiculous, stupid Christian group out there that was making these prophecies that Jesus was going to come sometime at the end of 2016 or something to that effect. About 2 3 years ago that this happened, 2016 around. I mean, it doesn't matter. And you get a lot of Christians that jump on this bandwagon and stuff like that, and become a bit nonsensical. And then I had a friend that actually messaged me, is like, Morgan, what do you think about this? Let me show you here a Bible verse. So I'm using Bible Gateway. They're pretty cool. You can find all kinds of different versions and stuff like that here. So here's a verse, Matthew 24:36. But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. So when these cults go out and make these prophecies that Jesus is going to come on this and that and the next day, they are relying on a significant amount of biblical ignorance within Christianity at large in order to fool people into this kind of nonsense, right? And now you get the same thing even in the secular world. Like you had Y2K, you had like the Mayan calendar thing, that the world was supposed to end in 2012 at the end of the Mayan calendar, and all that kind of stuff. And as always, it relies on the emotional lability. By lability, I mean volatility, people who are emotionally unstable, people who are gullible, people who are ignorant, and all that kind of stuff, to buy into this sort of thing, and subsequently, how can you say, subsequently demolish their lives because they believe they don't have much time left on this earth. And this actually is very, very useful in terms of psychological warfare and social engineering, because we need to understand that ever since the Enlightenment, and with all the liberalism and all the satanic philosophy that is out there in the secular world, the psyop is, right, like, for these things are come out specifically to discredit Christianity, not just religion at large, but Christianity, because Christianity is very, very interested in prophecy, right? And the reason why we know as Christians why Jesus is the Son of God and many other things is because there were prophecies made about him hundreds, even thousands of years before he arrived. And when he arrived, we looked at the prophecies and we looked at him and we're like, oh, all right, he fulfills all the criteria, and that's why we know. And the Bible also talks about the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, of the Persian Empire, of the Greek Empire, and all that kind of stuff. And the Bible even names Cyrus the Great, even before he even became known, became a thing, before he was born. Even the Bible named Cyrus the Great, and that God was going to use the Persian Empire in order to demolish the evil Babylonian Empire, and so on and so forth. And there's very interesting typology there. So Christianity is very, very interested in prophecies and all that kind of stuff. And in order to inflict damage upon the conscience of people when it comes to prophecy, if you constantly have people going on with false prophecies in the world, then when a Christian wants to talk about genuine prophecy, people are going to be so jaded with because of all of the garbage that's thrust at them, that they're not going to believe it. They're just, they're just talking rubbish again, and so on and so forth, because they've been injured so many times with false garbage that then these they won't believe Christianity and all that kind of stuff anymore when they say that we have sort of certain prophetic insights and all that kind of stuff. So in terms of cult behavior, now let me distinguish. They always set dates, right? Now Christianity does talk about an end time, but Christianity proper, if they're abiding by the biblical timeline, we talk about that there will be an end time. But no Christian, no true Christian will ever set a date. Will tell you on September, whenever the world is going to end, right? Any Christian, as soon as a Christian of any kind sets a date for the return of Jesus, you know that Christian is a false prophet. He's an idiot. He's trying to pull one over on you, right? Because so there's a difference between having an end time vision or an end time prophecy and so on and so forth, and The Bible even goes so far as to state certain conditions that will be present in the end time. So people will be lovers of themselves. So it predicts rampant narcissism, rampant sexual immorality, and all these sorts of things, which is how we can tell that we're sort of nearing the end. But in terms of setting a definite date, we have no idea. So a cult will always do that, because the reason why a cult does that is because there's a need to set that urgency for people to act now, before they're discovered as false. So there's always a sense of urgency, right? Which is why they set that date. It has to, if not by this date, the world is going to end, and you're going to be unprepared, and you're going to be all these kinds of things. Therefore, you have to do what I say right now. And they do that because before, like it's like a salesman trick, right? A salesman will try and badger you to close the deal, right? Let's say it's a dishonest salesman and he's selling you something that's not necessarily good. He's going to want to try to close the deal before you have enough time to realize and investigate and find out that the product he's trying to sell you is actually rubbish, okay? And that's a tactic that they use. So do we find this in the world? And the answer is absolutely, positively, 100% yes. So we're going to look at an article here, right? Now, just as an introduction, recently, the Intercontinental Panel on Climate Change, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate, the IPCC, released a brand new report. And of course, what do you expect on climate change? Of course, what do you expect? They've set a new date. So remember, in my previous video, back when Al Gore was doing his rounds, he was basically saying that by like 2015, if we don't do this and we don't do that and we don't do that, the world is going to end. We're all going to be underwater. There's going to be, tornadoes throwing people around all over the place and all that kind of stuff. So basically, if Al Gore and all of these guys were right, we shouldn't be here anymore. We should all be dead, right? And all of the coastal cities that we love, they should be underwater by now. All the ice caps should be completely gone by now, right? And we know we're now in 2019, and we know that absolutely not one single one of those predictions came true. None. Absolutely none. So in order to keep the game going, they always have to postpone the date. So the new date now that the IPCC is setting is, if we don't make drastic and unprecedented changes and heroic change, you're going to see it in this thing, heroic changes, then by 2040 we're all going to be genocide and we're all going to be dying. It's going to be like Mad Max apocalypse, right? So here we go. Now remember, when I talk to you about emotional lability, so people who are emotionally unstable react to things emotionally. So here we go, right? Here we go. This is in The Guardian. IPCC report makes US meteorologist cry. Now, there's actually quite a few things like this, right? There was another one. I couldn't find the damn thing. I looked for it. There's another one where this woman with her, and she had her three kids, and how when this report came out, her and all her children were all in tears, right? Because the world is going to end. So here we go, right? A man who broke down in tears shared his pain on Twitter, right? Who shared his pain on Twitter, is liked and loathed for his pledge to do his bit for the climate, right? Oh man. So immediately it's all emotional. It's just ridiculous, right? So a meteorologist who broke down in tears mused about a about a vasectomy. Now I'm sorry for laughing, but one of the things you need to understand something. This is the cult of environmentalism. Environmentalism hates humanity. Environmentalists hate the human existence, right? Environmentalism thinks that human beings are a parasite on the face of the earth, and that human beings deserve nothing but eradication. That is what environmentalism believes, that we are a scourge, a plague on the earth, right? It is a satanic, it is an evil, satanic doctrine, right? And it is their decided, this is part of the globalist cult. If you read a lot of the globalists, right? You go to the Georgia Guidestones. What is their aim? They want to reduce the population of the planet, right? In order to say this is no different than ancient pagans worshipping Mother Earth. It's the same thing. It's the same religion, right? There is an old adage, an old proverb that says wherever human life is devalued, right? Animals become worshipped, right? And you see that in ancient pagan societies where they worshipped animals, and what always happened? Humans ended up being sacrificed. Actually, no, I got that quote wrong. It says where animals are worshipped, human beings are sacrificed, right? Wherever animals are worshipped, human beings are sacrificed, and that holds true. And environmentalism, it's part of this overall globalist agenda to basically reduce the size of the population. It's satanic. End of story. Satanic. This is why this guy is now contemplating having a vasectomy, right? Because one of the ways that the environmentalists encourage us, one of their solutions is for people to stop having children. Now, here's the interesting thing. The only ones who stop having children are first world people. By the way, first world people don't pollute as much as third world people do, right? There's the statistic is, let me see if I can actually find it. If I can actually find it here, let's go quickly to Google, right? First. It's not typing. Right, so let's go here. You guys can look at my pretty face instead. Right, right, so let's have a look at this list here. I'm on Wikipedia, right, which is fine for the purpose. The most polluted cities in the world, right? Most polluted cities by concentration. The largest culprits for pollution in the world, they are apparently about 90, as much as 90% of all pollution in the world is produced by Africa, right? Africa and Asia, right? So when we talk about Asia, we're talking about India, we're talking about China, and so forth, right? Third world countries, right? Africa and Asia, and then South America is also competing for that, but they're not quite as bad. So the ones who are stopping to have children, right, are first world countries, right? First world countries who have who basically make the best moves in looking after their environment. They are the least polluting. The highest IQ countries are also that. Yet third world countries, which are polluting, which are the lowest IQ countries and stuff like that, except for China, because the Asians actually have a higher IQ than most Western countries. They've got no problem having as many children as they want, whether they can afford it or not, right? So India, Cameroon, India, Pakistan, Uganda, China, Qatar, Mongolia, China, Pakistan, China, Bangladesh, China. So you can see all there, the most polluted countries in the world. Saudi Arabia, China, Saudi Arabia, right? Cameroon, Bangladesh, Bahrain, so on and so forth. Bosnia, India, Chile, right? All Asian. South Africa, right? By the way, South Africans, right? The ANC is screwing you, right? This is because the ANC has completely demolished public services. The public services, the treatment, the sewage and stuff, they most of them don't work, okay? Because of the government over there, because of the ridiculous amount of corruption, right? Corruption does this. China, Bahrain, again, it's all African and Asian countries and South American countries, right? I mean, Western countries don't even make the top 200. Right? Look at that. Iran, Philippines, and so on and so forth, right? But who's telling them, right? The impetus is always, and this is why I'm telling you now, right? Here we go. Iran, Turkey, Peru, right? And it keeps going, right? Madagascar, Mexico, Cuba, Guatemala, South Africa again, Vereniging, right? Indonesia, Iran, Lebanon, Mexico. There we go, Poland. Boom, the first one. The first European country at 373. Okay? Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable, right? But now the ones who are expected, right, to constantly being bombarded with all of this thing as Western countries. Environmentalism is a desire to destroy Western civilization. Western civilization, as dysfunctional and as imperfect as it is, Western civilization is the best civilization on the planet at the moment. It is the least destructive, it is the least murderous, etc., etc., etc. It is the best civilization on the planet at the moment, right? The best ethics and so on and so forth. They actually care about the environment. They actually, and this is why you only see this in the Western world. They're the only ones that care. White people are supposed to be, oh, so evil and so terrible. They're the only ones that care about anything, which is why all the activism happens there, right? So that's why this guy is talking about a vasectomy. Any man who behaves like this, go and have a vasectomy, right? Because you're too much of a pansy to deserve your generative parts. Let me tell you, you're pathetic, right? Any man that behaves like this, you're pathetic. Okay? If you just blindly believe this garbage, it's unbelievable, right? So he wants to have a vasectomy and vowed to give up air travel in the wake of a blockbuster. It's always the same language. A blockbuster report from the UN's International Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, and he has found himself at the center of a storm about personal responses to climate change, right? Since his emotional musings on Twitter, meteorologist Eric Holthaus has been flooded with email about how individuals should respond to climate change. So obviously everyone has an opinion, right? Some were openly hostile and stuff like that. And you know what? I don't agree with people being hostile. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. But this goes to show the hysterical nature that this environmentalism has placed into the minds of people, right? I have had a couple of hundred people send emails or tweets. So this is obviously a hot button topic, right? Holthaus, who gained a large following during Hurricane Sandy, estimated he flew 75,000 miles last year, much of that to Ethiopia, where he's involved in a climate project. And so that's basically, you know, what he's saying. You know, he's considering having a vasectomy because, you know, having children, you know, because why, you know, we're terrible, you know, we're the ones causing it, we're destroying the planet. And now he doesn't want to go through air travel, and because air travel is polluting and all that sort of nonsense, right? Totally ridiculous, right? He despaired at the inertia and UN climate talks, right? If the UN is involved, you need to be suspicious straight away, all right? The UN is not a scientific body. It is a political body. It is a globalist body, and it has a globalist agenda. End of story, right? The UN does not care about you, which are unlikely to produce global action before 2020. On his way, right, he tweeted, "I just broke down in tears in the boarding area at SFO, San Francisco Airport, while on the phone with my wife." I'm surprised this pansy's got a wife, to be honest. But then again, you know, there are a lot of women these days who like weak men because they can manipulate them, right? I've never cried because of a science report before. I mean, why would you, you know? And this is not a science report. This is a political report, Not a scientific report. The science is not settled on this matter. In fact, the science shows that this is all garbage. The climate changes, but this is the fact that global warming is going to kill us all is absolute garbage, right? If you we'll talk about the medieval warm period just now. It felt like a hopeless moment, right? So again, that's what they want. You want to feel hopeless. You want to feel they strip you bare. It's just this raw emotion, right? And now he wants to go on, and in the absence of a global coordinated carbon policy. So again, right, we need some sort of body to impose a global thing, right? Again, this is globalism 101. I think it's going to be up to individuals, cities, and corporations. Of course, always the corporations to take action, right? It's always, let's get the government and the individual and the corporation, and the corporations can go and do whatever they want, right? Unbelievable, right? The corruption when government and corporations, this corporatism, the corruption, the evil that will ensue is unbelievable, right? The rise of the oligarchies. In his case, he says flying was the largest source of carbon emissions. Carbon is not even a pollutant. That's why this idiot, if he knew the first thing about science, he would realize that CO2 is not a pollutant, right? CO2 is not a pollutant. So it's just unbelievable, right? Here's another one. So here's the IPCC report. Must stop investing in fossil fuels in developing countries. Right, all these articles, that's what they linked to. Right, here's another one. The Intelligencer. Did a global fanfare. Paris Climate Accords were signed. For a brief moment in the beginning of a planet-saving movement. Yeah, like we can actually, like we can do anything to affect what's going to go on in the planet. I mean, people completely ignore the sun, right? Like you're going to change what the sun is doing, right? Like you're going to be able to change, because here's the thing, right? The climate is heavily affected by the Earth's magnetosphere and the sun. You cannot change, and those are the single greatest, biggest, most massive influences on global climate than any, or pretty much almost anything else, is the sun and the Earth's magnetosphere. You cannot change the Earth's magnetosphere, which is weakening over time. You cannot affect what the sun does, right? But no one talks about that. No one talks about those 2 points. And no one talks about the fact that if the world on average gets warmer, you're going to actually have fewer natural disasters, specifically tornadoes and hurricanes, because those rely on a massive difference between cold and hot temperatures in order to occur. So the more temperate the world is on average, the less hurricanes and things like that should actually occur, right? And they talk about things like drought and all that kind of stuff. Drought is actually caused, right, by a significant amount of dryness, low humidity. Like if you go to deserts, for example, some of the perfect things, if you go and look at where all the deserts are in Africa, desertification is caused by what do they call the prevailing dry wind. When dry wind comes in, evaporates all the water. Okay, evaporates all the water in a region and carries it off. And dry air is caused, for example, you have a cold in Africa, like if you look in South Africa, in the west coast of South Africa, on the west side of Africa, even into the interior, it is very, very dry. And the reason for that is because you've got a cold ocean current that runs down there. And so what you get is you get the prevailing winds that are cold and dry that sweep over the country, pick up all of the moisture because the air is dry, and move that moisture over, right? And then once that moisture hits the mountain range on the other side, on the east coast, then you get and is forced upwards, right? It then cools, because as it comes over, because it's very hot and dry, it picks up moisture, and as it picks up moisture, it warms up. By the time it hits the other side, it cools down and you get rains. So on the east side, and also you've got a warm ocean current then on the east side of South Africa, then it's over there, it's very green, it's very lush, all the way down to Cape Town, it's very nice. So it's actually, so if on average the oceans were warmer, right? If on average the oceans were warmer, you wouldn't have this process of desertification that are being caused by the prevalence of cold, dry air coming in off the oceans, which are cold, and you wouldn't have that process of desertification going on in Africa. So you would actually have less drought and less desertification if on average the oceans were warmer, the climate was warmer, and so on and so forth. I mean, come on, right? Think about where are all the rainforests? All the rainforests are all, for the most part, in some of the warmest areas in the world, right? And even in the cold places in the world, like if you look up at Scotland, they've got rainforests up there. Why? Because they've got warm ocean currents that flow past the Scottish coast, and that warm ocean allows the air, the region on average to be warmer because there's a lot more moisture in the air, and allows there for there to be a forest. You know, it's just it's obscene how these people just don't understand any of this, right? But you're not allowed logic, like I said in the first video. You're not allowed logic and stuff like that. And here they are, they're setting a date, 2040, if we don't get things done, right? And it's always these emotionally charged language, right? But almost immediately, the international goal it established of limiting global warming to 2 degrees Celsius, the medieval warm period was about that much warmer than it is now. They're complaining that we are 1 degree warmer than we were about 50 to 100 years ago. The medieval warm period, which was between 900 and 1300 AD, was almost 2 degrees warmer than it is even now. Okay, so just bear that in mind. And the world didn't end. In fact, it was a very, very prosperous time for Europe in particular, and for many other places. Was a very, very prosperous time, right? Because like in England, we could have vineyards, and there was agriculture. It was a lot easier because it was warmer, and so on and so forth. When it's warmer, you have more humidity. More humidity means plants grow better. Also, when you have more CO2, plants grow better because plants require CO2 in order to grow. Right? Dramatically began to seem to many of the world's most vulnerable. Always to the world, it's always this emotional appeal, right? To the world's most vulnerable, dramatically inadequate, right? The Marshall Islands representative gave it a blunter name, calling 2 degrees of warming genocide, right? Always, it's deactivate the brain, turn on the emotions, right? All the time, and we're all gonna die. The alarming new report, it's alarming. Of course it's alarming. It wouldn't be anything else, would it? Otherwise, you can't get anyone to do what you want. You may have read about this week from the UN's IPCC report, which examines just how much better 1.5 degrees of warming would be than 2. Echoes the charge. Amplifies, maybe a better term. Hundreds of millions of lives are at stake, the report declares. It should the world warm more than 1.5 degrees Celsius, even though we know for a fact that in the past it's been more than that, warmer, right? Without any problem, no problem, right? Which it will do as soon as 2040. Here we go. They're setting by 2040. We're done. If current trends continue, you said that they always can fall back, right? So if the predictions don't come true, it's because we managed a little bit here, and then they'll just, when 2040 comes, nothing will still be around, and then they'll make it for 2060. You know, they made it for 2015. 2015's come and gone. We're all fine. Now it's 2040, right? And they just keep doing that all the time, pushing it forward. You know, and the environmentalism, the human hating theology, right? I'm going to call it theology because even though it's in large approved by secular people, it's secular theology, basically what it is, right? Because they worship the planet. This is old time nature worship, and they don't even realize it, right? Nearly all coral reefs would die out. Oh, goodness me. Wildfires and heat waves. Wildfires happen because human beings are irresponsible and we do not manage, right? It's because of corruption. We do not manage the environment correctly. That's why wildfires happen. Because some stupid kid goes out and plays with fire and burns everything down. Oh, how terrible, right? And wildfires have always been a natural part of the process, right? There are trees and plants out there, right, where the seeds do not germinate unless they're exposed to wildfires. Okay? Wildfires are actually a natural part of the ecological cycle. But they won't tell you that. Okay? Would sweep across heat waves would sweep across the planet annually, and the interplay between drought and flooding and temperatures. Here's the thing, right? Another point. Here's another point. Cults, when the person is exhibiting ideological possession or occult behavior, you will find that they tend to have one theory that explains everything. Right? So with the whole climate change thing, right? They have this one thing, CO2. This one thing, okay? CO2. And CO2 is able to explain if it freezes, it's because of CO2. If it goes hot as hell, it's because of CO2. If it doesn't do anything, it's because of CO2. When one theory, and it's actually a scientific point, right? If your theory explains absolutely everything, even contradictory, right? If your theory explains everything, even evidence that contradicts the theory, you know that the theory is it's religion. It's not a scientific theory, right? It's false religion. It's ideology, right? We know this. We know this, right? And you get that. People who believe in one thing, it's like feminism, right? Patriarchy explains everything. If a woman succeeds, patriarchy. If a woman fails, patriarchy. If a woman is raped, patriarchy. If a woman is not raped, patriarchy, because she must be sucking up to, you see, if a woman does well, she must be sucking up to the patriarchy. You see? She must be favored by the patriarchy. So everything is explained by the patriarchy, okay? And like all of this racial stuff, right? If a black person suffers, if a Filipino suffers, if anyone other than a white person suffers for any reason, it's the white man's fault, right? If I go out there, I'm a Latino. If I go out there and I suffer, right, it must be the white man's fault. Somewhere along the line, it's the white man's fault. Forget about the fact that I'm autonomous, that I have my own mind, that can make my own choices and stuff. No, it's the white patriarchy's fault, right? One thing that explains everything. Then you know straight away it's false. It's unidimensional. It's a unidimensional way of seeing the world, right? There's no subtlety. There's no intelligence. It's all just emotionally charged nonsense. Yeah, avoiding that scale of suffering, the report says. Yeah, like people don't suffer enough as it is. All right, now we got to put up with this garbage, right? And all of the actual suffering is ignored. Okay, all of the actual suffering is ignored. For example, go to the U.S. Black people in the U.S. are still languishing after stupid libertarian, leftist laws, fight on war on poverty and stuff like that, that has done nothing but make this situation worse. They're still languishing. Black people in the US are still languishing, right? For all the good that the social justice ideology has done nothing for black people in the US. It has done nothing for Latino people in the US. It has done nothing for black or Latino people anywhere in the world. For no one in the world, all the people that were suffering 50 or 100 years ago are still suffering. The only difference now is they're suffering, but they no longer have family to fall back on, because the family is being destroyed. Right? Why is the family being destroyed? Because of idiots like this, right, who want to have a vasectomy because, oh, dreadful, right? And feminism that says, oh, woman, I don't need no man, rather go out into the workforce and work for another man, okay? Let me not be employed at home, right, where I'm in equal footing with a loving husband, where I'm looking after my home and my children in a place where I have full autonomy to run the home as I see fit in a loving and comforting way. No, let me leave the home and go work for some corporation, some faceless corporation, for, you know, because that's better, right? Because that's for some reason is better, right? Let me go, instead of slaving away at home for my husband and my children, whom I love and who love me, let me rather go slave away for a faceless corporation, because that's the way to go, right? Because, and now women are realizing it wasn't that good, and guys are like, yeah, well, we told you so. Work is not that great, okay? It's not that much fun. There's a reason why we need to be paid to do it. Right? Civilization, it's all nonsense. If you are alarmed by those sentences, then you should be. They are horrifying. But it is, actually, it's even worse than that. Considerably worse. Right? Have they spoken about evidence? No evidence is being discussed yet. No evidence. It's just it's just rhetoric. It's just rhetoric. In fact, it is a beyond best case scenario. What has been called a genocidal level of, they don't even use language properly, genocidal. A tsunami is not genocidal. Nature cannot be genocidal, you idiots, right? Again, it's the modification, it is the perversion of language. Genocide. How the hell does any of this qualify as genocide? Unless again, here comes the racial politics. Here comes the racial politics, right? Genocide. It must be the white man's fault. Because what are they doing? They're talking about the most vulnerable people in the world. Who are the most vulnerable? Of course, it's going to be the Africans. It's going to be the poor Asians, the poor Indians, the poor South Americans. Shame for them, and they're going to suffer because of corporate greed, because of those white Western males who, by the way, happen to be the least polluting class of people on the planet. Okay. They pollute almost nothing compared to everyone else put together, but they are oppressing everyone else, okay? Because now this is how this is how they get it into your mind, right? There's a subtle suggestion here when they're talking about genocidal level of warming, right? They literally want you to believe that when they're talking about it means that someone is, it's not just a thing, that there's someone here trying to get you. All right, and this is the globalist stupidity, right? Constantly make people believe that they're under attack all the time. Make them nervous, make them emotionally volatile, and so on and so forth, right? And this is why they want the world, feminism, to make women go out, leave the safety of the home, of their fathers, of their brothers, of their husbands, right? Go out into the world and be completely vulnerable. Why? If you look, and there's a reason why they want that, because women are much higher in emotional volatility than men on average, right? If you go look at my video, personality traits, 60% of the time, right, on average, women are significantly higher than men in emotional volatility, which is another, and emotional lability, like emotional instability, falls under that category, right? So neuroticism has got two subcategories. It is volatility and withdrawal. Volatility is what makes a person emotionally reactive. So all the people, right? So that's why they want women to go out into the world and be completely vulnerable, because women are easier to manipulate emotionally. End of story. I don't care whether you like this or not. Women are easier to manipulate emotionally than men are, because women on average, due to their biological makeups, because personality traits, this is biology, right, are higher than men on average by a significant margin in emotional volatility. It's that simple. Higher in neuroticism, and it becomes even worse when they do not have the protection and support of a family that is intact, right? Which is why they wanted women to abandon the household, to abandon the only place of safety that they have, because if they have abandoned their place of safety, they become vulnerable, they become easier to attack, and they become easier to manipulate. And this is also why they want masculinity to be feminized, because the more you feminize men, the more emotionally volatile they become. So ladies and gentlemen, when you go out there and you see men who are emotionally volatile, whether it is violent or whether it is tearful, right? So this guy who is bursting into tears, right? That's emotional volatility. A man who, when his ego is offended, he goes out there and he wants to start beating people up and he becomes very confrontational. That is a man who is emotionally volatile. Okay, he's not secure. That is not a secure man. A man with all that bravado, oh, look at me, I'm, that's an insecure man. That's an emotionally volatile man. Okay? And that is why, because the more emotionally volatile people they have in the world, the easier they are to manipulate. And this is why the LGBT community is going and pushing this like nothing else on earth, right? Because if you look at the LGBT community, one of the major things that characterizes the LGBT community is emotional volatility, which is why rates of suicide are astronomical in that community, right? Because they're all feminized, right? The transgenders, the homosexuals, they're all feminized. And then if you look at, for example, the lesbians, because they're actually more masculine, they're actually a lot less emotionally volatile, which women can be, right? It's not that all women are volatile. Many women, for example, there's a woman very close to me in my family who, her emotional volatility is even lower than mine, and I'm very low, right? I'm in the ninth percentile or eighth. I think I'm in the 8th percentile for emotional volatility. No. I'm in the 8th percentile for neuroticism, and volatility I am in the 13th percentile, but in withdrawal I'm in the 4th percentile. So they sort of balance each other out. It brings the overall. But this girl, I'm just going to say it, my sister is even lower than I am in that regard, which is quite, so it does show that women can be very low. And you find that on average lesbians who exhibit more masculine traits, it's not because they're masculine or because they're actually a man in a woman's body, it's merely because biologically they have lower levels of volatility, which is why you see them carry on and perform like idiots less than almost anyone else in that community. It's actually quite interesting to see. That's why they seem to behave more like men, on average do. And interestingly enough, autistic women behave very, very much like men. I've got a lady who's very, very close to me. She's autistic. She's high functioning, and she's constantly telling me, she's like, you know what? I think like a man more than she can't get along with women at all. Because she gets irritated with their emotional volatility. It's actually very interesting. And there's another lady, very, very popular, who sort of says the same thing. It's actually very interesting, right? Which explains why men on average get or contract autism more than women, right? Significantly more. I think for every two or three men with autism, there's only one woman with autism. So it seems that the physical makeup or the biological makeup is very, very important. So there we go. That's it, right? That's you see it there, right? Emotional, climate genocide is coming. It's actually worse. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Right? So here, oh, there we go. Again, another one. Absent heroic efforts. Right? 1.5 degrees. The same garbage, right? Several hundred million lives are at stake. Existential risk greatly escalate. You're right? And we're on for 3.4 degrees. You know, oh, wow. So here we go. I want to talk to you about the global warming, the medieval warm period, right? Geological evidence of recurring climate cycles and their implications for the cause of global warming, climate changes. The past is the key to the future, right? Not necessarily, okay? This is assuming, what's the term? This is assuming that everything is completely and utterly, it's the past is not necessarily the key to the future, because the trend might not carry on, but it does have something to tell you. And over here, so the medieval warm period, 900 AD, 1300 AD, population more than doubled, alpine trees, crops flourished, so on and so forth. Vikings took advantage of the climate in order to colonize Greenland. Right. So one of the reasons why the Vikings were able to go out and do their thing is because they didn't have a whole whack of ice blocking their way, so they were able to go out and do a lot of these things, right? Grapes were grown as far north as England, right, where grape growing is now not feasible, and is about 500 kilometers north of present vineyards in France and Germany, right? So on and so forth. So we know, elsewhere in the world, prolonged droughts affected the southwestern United States, and so on and so forth, right? So when you have these cycles of changes, right? So there would have been prolonged droughts and so on and so forth. So just because the earth is warmer, it doesn't necessarily talk about what the ocean currents and things like that were like back in those days, because you will have droughts if there's prevailing droughts and stuff like that, and how everything, because here's the thing, in the Christian view, we believe that there was a worldwide flood, and the worldwide flood was a major cataclysm, and everything takes time to stabilize, right? Now, for Christians, we believe that God created the world to be inhabited. So this idea that you have uninhabitable regions, cold regions in the north and south of our planet, shows that the world has gone through quite a dramatic change since creation, right? And we believe that all of this ice and stuff, that the ice age happened shortly after, right, because of the cataclysmic events that occurred after the global flood. And once that all happened, the world takes, because it was so massive, right, the world takes quite a while to eventually pan out and restabilize itself and reach equilibrium again. And so you are going to have these unusual cycles and catastrophes and things like that. Whereas before the flood, you wouldn't have had tectonic plates. Now you have tectonic plates. Things are constantly moving around and shifting and all that sort of thing. And as the world gets older, the magnetosphere becomes weaker and weaker. The magnetosphere protects us from incoming solar radiation, sort of particles and stuff like that. What's the term? So basically, the this is why the auroras happen, because as sort of solar flares and things come in, and also other radiation from elsewhere in the universe come in, it hits the magnetosphere and is deflected, and thereby it protects us from a lot of this stuff that's coming in. But if it is weakened and these things are allowed to penetrate, it will have quite a massive effect, also depending on where sunspots and things like that happen and occur in the sun, for how long it stays. And these are major things that, and none of it has anything to do with human activity. Absolutely none. And this is not to say that we shouldn't be concerned about the environment, that we should stop pollution, that we shouldn't recycle. We should do all of these things. But this here, right, goes beyond merely, because Christians believe in stewardship of the environment, right? We believe in looking after the environment, but this is a satanic ideology that is moving the world towards one world government, and it's a satanic agenda that is moving the world towards globalism, towards a one world government, because the Bible talks about beasts, right? And the final beast in Revelation and in Daniel and all that kind of stuff, the final beast is a global power, right? A beast in the Bible, in the Revelation, in the imagery, refers to a king or a kingdom. The final beast is going to control the entire world. The final beast is basically, it's a globalist religio-political system is what it is, right? So when Christians and anyone, Christians first of all should know better. As soon as they see any globalist agenda going on, they should immediately cotton on to this fact that there's something going on here. Every move to globalism, right? If you're a Christian, you will understand that globalism is a move towards this beast system in Revelation that will control the whole world and be basically antichrist and all that sort of thing. And what a lot of people don't realize, again, is that globalism has been tried once before. Okay, it's the globalism, it's the cult of globalism, and all of these things are going in there to fanaticize people and demolish them so that they will accept it, right? Because when they offer you the solution, they say, "Come to us for peace and safety." What does the Bible say? They will cry peace and safety, and then boom, sudden destruction, right? Globalism has been tried before, and God put an end to it. It was known as the Tower of Babel, right? At the Tower of Babel, that was the first globalist project, where God said to Noah, first to Adam and Eve, he says, spread out into the earth and go and live out on the earth, and go and do your own thing and enjoy the earth, right? Then the same thing happened after Noah. He's like, go out and be fruitful and go and replenish the earth, right? Just go and spread out and enjoy everything, right? But they didn't do that. Instead, they formed the Tower of Babel, and it was to unite the world under the known world at that time under a globalist agenda. That was the first globalist agenda, and God says, I'm having none of this. So when we look at the nations, all the different nations, all the different languages, God was the one that created the nations. God was the one that, through an act of force, right? Tower of Babel, he ended it and he confused the languages. God is the creator of the nations, right? So this whole globalism thing, right? Because globalism violates the national identity of people, right? And it makes you look at your race only. It plays this race baiting thing, and so on and so forth. It plays this ideological game, and it violates the national identity. It's wanting to strip the national identity of people, because they talk about nationalism, because that's the rhetoric these days. Nationalism, it's evil. Now, civic nationalism, where the state defines the nation, that's evil. That's satanic, right? That's also more of a globalist agenda. But the nation is a creation of God. The nation should be respected, right? Whether you are the Xhosa nation, whether you are the Italian nation, whether you are the British nation, whether you are the Indian nation, whatever it is, that should be respected. You should respect the people groups and their cultures and all that kinds of things. But this cultural relativism, where they say that all cultures are the same and they must cross-pollinate, they must all do. Now, it's fine. It's one thing to go and enjoy another person's culture, but it's a whole other thing, because what their plan is to do is to rub up the nations against each other, to cause violence and to cause confusion, and to eventually collapse the national identity into a homogenous identity, which is a globalist identity. Because what people are going to do is they're going to rub up the nationalities against each other so much that when people are tired of the violence and the strife, they're going to be willing to give up their national identity in order to have peace. And that's then where the problem comes in. But if we look at the Bible does not endorse The Bible is all for the nation. Think about the nation of Israel, right? The nation of Israel, the Israelites, they were in Egypt for 400 years, right? And when they left Egypt, they never became Egyptians. When they left Egypt, they were still Israelites. They were not Egyptians, right? They retained their national identity for all of those 400 years, even though they were in Egypt, right? And and you can have a nation as long as they respect the national laws, because the Bible tells that even if you are a nation, and this is what the Bible talks about Christians, the Christianity is almost like a nation to itself, much like Israel. And he says, even if you're in a country that is not Christian, you still need to obey the laws, right? And be at peace with the local people and respect their sovereignty and all these sorts of things. And, you know, a lot of people have violated that. But anyway, I've digressed, but yeah, I like to talk. We talk, right? It's a conversation. So that's it. You know, that's where they're going with this. This is a total global agenda. They are trying to harangue you and harass you, and all of these environmentalist things. All it does is it allows people to become it causes people to become hysterical. It causes people to abandon common sense. It causes fear. It's fear mongering. Right? It's fear. This is a cult of environmentalism, and what they're trying to do is herd people to give up national sovereignty, to give up their national identity, and hand all power over to a centralized global state that is going to impose its will upon all the people in the world. And the environmentalist agenda is how the globalists will take over the environment, because in order to control people, you need to control the political, you need to control the religious, and you also need to control the environment, as in the natural resources, the environment in general. And this is how they take control over their environment, over the environmental resources. And you become like, if you go to the old medieval days, right, where you had the king and the lords and they owned everything, and you as a peasant, you own nothing, you own no land. And that is satanic. That's anti-biblical, because in the nation of Israel, when Jerusalem was established, when they moved into Canaan, all of the different tribes and all of the people, they received their own land, right? Everyone, if we look at the story, when Ahab tried to buy, he was married to Jezebel, and he tried to buy land. I forget the name of the guy. He tried to buy the land off this one individual, right? And he refused to sell him the land, because he's like, how can I betray the inheritance of my forefathers by selling you? So he refused. This is how important it was. He refused to sell his land to the king, because the ethic was, how can I violate the inheritance of my fathers? Because everyone in Israel had their own land, their own, and your own land is like your little mini sovereign state within a sovereign state within the nation. Globalism and the environmentalism is wanting to remove that from you, where the only ones who control all the land and all the resources are the powers that be at the top, who will dictate to you what you can and cannot do. Like in the United States, you're not even allowed to collect rainwater, for heaven's sake. If you've got your own property and stuff, it's illegal to collect rainwater, for heaven. It's completely and utterly ridiculous, and it's an oppressive ideology that's gonna ruin people. We need to shun this, because this is satanic, this is anti-biblical, this is anti-human. It's anti-human garbage propaganda. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, peace out. That's it for me for today. I hope this helps you out. I hope this gives you something to think about. If you think I'm wrong, if you think I'm an idiot, go ahead and tell me and show me why I'm wrong. You know, I change my mind on things, right? You have to, if you're investigating stuff. I don't mind. I'll change my mind, you know. But you know, just final word. If you're a Christian, it is true that we have stewardship over nature. It is true. And we need to look after the natural world. But this environmentalist stuff, this UN panel, this IPCC, this is a satanic agenda. This environmentalism is a satanic agenda that hates Christianity and hates humanity and wants to oppress and control humanity and wants to strip human beings of the rights and the privileges that were given to God, where the world is to be enjoyed, shared by everyone, and is not to be controlled by a small minority that's going to dictate everything to you. All right. And that's where we're headed. That's where we're headed with all of this nonsense. But you know, the Bible predicts it. It says the whole world is going to wander after the beast, and it is, right? The UN is part of that beast power. That beast of Revelation that controls the whole world. The UN is part of that beast power. End of story. All the globalist movements are part of the beast power, and all of the activism, the feminism, the Black Lives Matterism, the Black consciousness movement, the white consciousness movement, all the religious relativism movements, all the anti-hate stuff, the social justice warriors, the all of the political, this is the mainstream media, right? The mainstream media, all of the stuff is part of the beast, is part of the beast system that is moving everyone by fear-mongering, by causing the nations to war against each other, by causing black people and white people to be afraid of each other, to hate each other, to be suspicious of each other, rather than be friends, rather than be decent to each other, right? It wants the nations to war with each other. It wants the nations to hate each other. And this is all part of the movement towards a global government so that the beast system can rule the entire world, and it's going to do that with absolutely everything. And this environmentalism cult, all the cults, all of these things is many cults, is many things, right? This environmentalism cult is going to allow universal control of resources, and further empowers, like they were saying earlier on, the corporations and stuff, further empowers monopoly and dictatorial rule by states and corporations to rule every single aspect of the individual, so that all of your freedoms will eventually be removed. It's evil stuff, and you need to be aware of it. You need to wake up to this stuff, right? And Christians are so pathetically blind to this, because we're seeing this all over in our churches. I have these conversations all the time with people who buy into this garbage just because, you know, they don't seem to understand that stewardship and environmentalism are completely different things. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, cheerio, take it easy, and yeah, thank you for watching. I hope this helped you out and gave you some food for thought. I'll see you guys next time. Cheerio, goodbye.